Chris Farfoy.
Mr Chair, for the opportunity to speak to this bill. I think it's clause 26 that pertains to the change in regime to strip searches, and because the Chair of the Law and Order Committee has just mentioned that the change in regime to the more intrusive search becoming the standard search would ratchet down, I think it was the phrase, the tension between the inmates and the prison officers. I just wanted to have a look at the submission made by the Corrections Association to the Law and Order Select Committee, because those people who go to work in our prisons every day and have to deal with the danger of dealing with these highly volatile inmates, you think that the government would try and listen to them, because part of the intention of this bill is to make life in prisons a bit more efficient for the management of those prisons and safer for the staff. But the Corrections Association in its submission completely is the opposite of what Jackie Dean has purported to be the truth, because in their submission to our Law and Order Select Committee, they made it very clear that strip searches are carried out every day in prisons across New Zealand. To include such an invasive procedure like this, Cairns believes will result in an increase in staff assaults. So here we have the Chair of the Law and Order Select Committee praising this move to go to the more invasive strip search in our prisons, going from two regimes to the one, using the lights and mirrors that are used in the one that they want to make standard, saying that it will make our prisons a safer place for our corrections officers to work, when the people who are doing this every day disagree with what the Chair of the Law and Order Select Committee just said. So that's a question I certainly want to put to the Minister and the Chair. If we've got submissions from people who are working at the coalface in these prisons day to day, have to do these searches, dangerous searches, which I'm pretty sure every member of this Parliament would not want to do every day, are saying to us that if you make us do this every day, you're going to increase the danger for us. And I'll read this again. To include such an invasive procedure like this, Cairns believes will result in an increase in staff assaults. And I think it's a responsibility of this House and this government to make those prisons as safe a place as it can possibly be for those people, those corrections officers who have to take out this work. And that moves me to really what is the main opposition from the Labor Party to this bill, and I think it's contained in Clause 5, and that is the delegation of powers from the Chief Executive of the Department of Corrections to those staff who work in the privately run prisons. So we have one in Auckland at the moment, and we know that one is planned by the government to go online at Whitty. And the kind of powers that we're talking about with the delegation to those staff who work in private prisons is around things like security classification of inmates and the temporary release of prisoners in those private prisons. And Mr Chair, we do have an ideological difference of opinion with the government around who should be operating our prisons. We don't believe that it is the role of a profit-motivated company to be imprisoning people and to have responsibility over them. That is, on this side of the House, we believe, is the role of government. We strongly oppose privatised prisons, which is why we strongly oppose Clause 5 in this bill. We believe that prison management involving the taking away of people's freedom, locking them up, and making sure that we can rehabilitate them to the best of the state's ability is a core role of government, just like it is with our defence forces and our police. It is in the best interests of our community, and we believe the government has a moral and fiscal obligation to take the responsibility of making sure that it is the state that looks after corrections and imprisoning people. And Mr Chair, we're not alone in that. There are a number of submissions to the Select Committee around that. One was from Rethinking Crime and Punishment, which, and I'll read again for the benefit of the House, said that the incarceration of citizens, their treatment within prison and rehabilitation throughout a prison sentence is, in our view, a primary function of government, and we 100%, Mr Chair.
Chris Farfoy.
And Mr Chair, we 100% agree with that. And I think one of the concerns that we certainly share with Rethinking Crime and Punishment is that they're concerned that when we give powers to private contractors in this area, that the government is opening the door, and I'll start quoting from their submission again, the government is opening the door for misuse of power and corruption as the checks and balances that apply to government departments may not be passed through to private entities. And they talk about examples of behaviour like this being evidenced in private corporations in the United States. Jackie Dean, in her speech, also said that it is absolutely a given that we will oppose this bill on that grounds, and that she is 100% right. We don't believe it is the place of private companies who have, at the end of the day, a profit motivation. The bottom line is the bottom line, to be making profits of people that we as a state judge and say that should be locked up, and in one perverse view it would be in their interest to keep them in there, because it will, as I think Charles Chauvel said in his second reading speech, ends up becoming a sausage factory. They want inmates to be in their prisons because without inmates they don't have any business. Mr Chair, I think I've said enough around the private management of prisons, and I did want to move on to strip searching again, because I think that some of the arguments put forward by the Chair of the Law and Order Select Committee just haven't stacked up in terms of their support for changing the regime from the standards from the 2 searches to the 1 search. And there was a fair amount of opposition to the change of regime in the strip searches within the Select Committee as well. And funnily enough, the Ombudsman, someone who's looking very closely at the government's behaviour at the moment, who expressed a strong opinion in their submission to the committee. And again, reading from their committee, they said that they expressed strong concerns about the amendment of the Corrections Act, which diminishes the safeguards against prisoners being strip-searched unnecessarily or inappropriately, and also removes the less intrusive type of strip search. We have previously stated that the existing requirements for strip searches provide a very good balance between the rights of the department to manage its prisoners and the rights of prisoners to not be subjected to unreasonable searches. In our view, they do not need to be changed. So, if the Minister in the Chair does take a call, I'd like her to give us her opinion as to why this government is ignoring the calls of the Office of the Ombudsman, is ignoring the calls of the Corrections Association, who represent, I think, a majority of those corrections officers who work day to day in these situations which we are discussing in this Parliament tonight. Because that change in regime in the strip searches, I believe, is something of an attempt by the government to look tough against prisoners. We've heard from Jackie Dean that she quite likes the look of people getting locked up. I don't necessarily think that's a good look for the government. So I want to hear from the Minister in the Chair. I want to hear from the Minister in the Chair why the government is ignoring that call from people like the Ombudsman, from organisations like the Ombudsman, and people like the officers who are at the front line, as to why it is ignoring that move, which our corrections officers thinks it will put us in danger. And I just want to also back up what the Honourable Phil Goff said about our visit to Rumataka Prison, a very useful visit by the Law and Order Select Committee, and I thank the Minister for letting us do that, because it did give us the opportunity to go and speak face to face with those corrections officers and ask them the question. And I agree with what Phil Goff said, because I too asked those officers if they think it would make a material difference to them if they had the ability just to have 1 search, to have the more intrusive search. And they all said no. And they echoed what was in that Corrections Association submission, that in the end they thought it was going to do more good than harm. More good than harm. So I hope the Minister in the Chair does take a call and explains to all those corrections officers who have expressed their opinion in their submission as to why she is continuing to change that strip search regime in the face of opinions from people at the front line and people who have had a look at the policy ramifications of this. and have said that this is not a good thing to do. We are opposing this bill on those two grounds and another one, which we'll probably take some time up on later, and that is around a bit of a botch-up on the government's department and on the government's behalf, and poor old Anne Tolley has to clean up. Mr Chair.
Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Chairman, I just want to take a few minutes to